Building Neo4j applications with TypeScript. Lesson 1. Installation. You can install the Neo4j JavaScript Driver as a dependency in your project by running the npm install Neo4j-driver command. Once the dependency is installed, import the Neo4j object into your code using the require function in ES5 or the ES6 import syntax. The Neo4j object contains a driver function, which accepts database credentials and returns a new driver object. The function expects at least 2 arguments. First, a connection URI, for example, Neo4j:// localhost, port 7687 for a local instance, or for a Neo4j Aura instance, Neo4j+s for a secure connection, followed by your database ID, .databases.neo4j.io. And second, an authentication token. This example shows basic username and password authentication, but Neo4j also supports bearer tokens and LDAP integration. You can provide additional driver configuration in the third argument, for example, encryption levels, connection timeouts, or disabling lossless integers, which we'll cover later in the course. You can verify that your connection details are correct by calling the verify connectivity method. The function returns a promise, resolving to undefined if the connection was successful. If a connection cannot be established, an unauthorized error will be thrown, allowing you to detect connection problems before your application starts. Sessions. From the driver object, you will open one or more sessions. A session is a client-side abstraction that borrows underlying TCP connections from a connection pool held by the driver and uses them to communicate with your database instance. Sessions should be considered lightweight and disposable, and can be opened and closed without impacting application performance. Sessions have a default access mode of write, routing queries to the leader in the cluster, but you can override this at a session level by setting the default access mode during instantiation. This mode is also overwritten by the individual transaction calls. In a multi-database environment, you can also specify a database for the duration of the session. This defaults to the user's home database as defined in neo4j.conf, usually Neo4j. You will use the methods on the session object to run one or more Cypher statements. Once you have finished with your session, make sure to call the session.close method to close the session and release any remaining connections back to the driver's connection pool. Running a Cypher statement. To run a one-off Cypher statement, call the session.run method. The method accepts 3 arguments. First, a string to represent the Cypher statement. Next, you can pass an object representing query parameters. In this example, the title property is referred to in the Cypher statement by prefixing the word title with a $sign. You can also pass an object as the third parameter, defining the transaction configuration, including the transaction timeout in milliseconds. Note that this method will not retry the statement when experiencing transient errors such as temporary connection problems. For this reason, these should only be used for one-off queries and are not recommended for use in production. Processing results. The res value returned by session.run is an implementation of the query result interface, which guarantees access to the individual records returned by the query. Individual records are accessed through the records property. Records is an array of record objects. Each record object has a get method for retrieving individual values from a record. In this example, the code is extracting the name value from each record. We will cover result processing in more detail later on in the course. Closing the driver instance. Finally, once you finish interacting with Neo4j, remember to call the close method. Calling the close method will close any open sessions, disconnect from all instances, and release any resources held by the driver, which will allow your application to exit gracefully. You now have all the information you need to run your first Cypher statement within your application. Take the quiz below to check your understanding. The next lesson is a challenge, where you will use this knowledge to create a new driver instance and run a Cypher statement against a Neo4j sandbox instance.